Sometimes the pressures that we face are so much, are so overwhelming that we just feel like giving up, we feel like quitting. But whenever you are faced with pressures from all around, always remember and remind yourself that diamonds are created under pressure. And tell yourself that right now I am diamond in the making. So with that, we start with the anatomy of the sinuses and rhinosinusitis. Now, sinuses anatomy are asked very, very commonly in your exam. Again, the rhinosinusitis, especially the surgery that we do, the complications of that surgery, again, very commonly asked. So let us see what all in the sinuses we need to know. Now, what at all are sinuses? Yes, sinuses are lateral outpouchings from the lateral wall of nose. In whichever bone they grow into, they are named accordingly. So from the lateral wall, grow lateral outpouchings and they grow into the adjacent bones. So the outpouching which grows into the maxillary bone are known as maxillary sinuses, which grows into the ethmoid bone are known as ethmoid sinuses, which grows into the frontal bone are known as frontal sinuses, and the ones that grow into the sphenoid bone are known as sphenoid sinuses. Now later on they enlarge and they get filled with air, and their function is to lighten the skull bone. And also they act as resonating chambers for voice. Now, why are they important to us is because they are connected to the nose. They develop as lateral outpouchings from the lateral wall of the nose. So the epithelial lining the nose is the same that lines all these sinuses. So infection can go very commonly from the nose into the sinuses through these connections between the nose and the sinuses. And when the infection goes through the nose to the sinuses, then these sinuses start creating problem for us, and then we have to approach these sinuses. So that is why we need to know exactly which sinuses are involved, where the sinuses open in the lateral wall, which are present at what age, which sinuses present with which type of presentation when infected. So all this is very commonly asked in your exams. So we have how many pairs of sinuses? Yes, this you will tell me how many pairs of sinuses do we have? 2, 3, 4. Yes, we have 4 paired sinuses. We have 4 sinuses and all of them are paired. And they are divided into anterior and posterior groups. Anterior are the ones that we see here like this anteriorly. So we have the frontal, anterior, ethmoid and maxillary. They are the anterior group. So the lining epithelium of the sinuses, can you tell me? Yes, it will be the same as the lining epithelium of the nasal cavity. That is ciliated, columnar. Tell me what? Yes, pseudostratified. Pseudostratified. So the sinuses are divided into anterior. Anterior is the frontal, the anterior ethmoids, and the maxillary. The posterior group is the posterior ethmoids. And we have the sphenoid sinuses. Now let us do them one by one. Now the largest paranasal sinus is the maxillary sinus. This one is the maxillary sinus. It is the largest with a capacity of around 15 ml. It is also the earliest to develop. We will first see the important facts about the maxillary sinus and then we will quickly write them down. So yes, this is the earliest paranasal sinus to develop and it is present at birth. It is also the largest paranasal sinus. Now just see here, what is the shape of this maxillary sinus? Yes, it is pyramidal. This here is the apex of the maxillary sinus. So this apex points at the zygomatic bone. This here is the base. So base of the maxillary sinus is the lateral wall of nose. This here is the roof. The roof is the floor of the orbit, and here just note here this here is the floor of the maxillary sinus, and also please note that the floor of the maxillary sinus lies even below the level of the floor of nose. This is the level of floor of nose. This is lying even below this, whereas where does the maxillary sinus open? Yes, it opens high up in the middle meatus. To be more specific, can you tell me where in the middle meatus it opens? Yes, very good. It opens in the infundibulum of the middle meatus. We saw that so beautifully when we did the lateral wall of nose. Yes, so what are you noticing? Are you noticing that the floor is quite down, whereas the drainage is quite up, which means that the drainage of the maxillary sinus is anti-gravity. Yes, so that predisposes the maxillary sinus to infections. Why? Because the chances of secretions getting collected here will be very common. So the chances when the secretions get collected, they will get infected, and that makes the maxillary sinus the most common seat of sinusitis in adults. Now also note here that the maxillary sinus floor is related to some tooth. Can you see some tooth? What's the significance of knowing that? Let me ask you. Extraction of which tooth can lead to a oroantral fistula? Yes, if you have problem in which tooth, you will have to be very, very careful to choose your dentist, because if not properly done, it will result in a oroantral fistula. Yes, I will give you the hint. It is one premolar and one molar. Yes, so one premolar and one molar means they are lying together. Which one? Second premolar and first molar. Second premolar and first molar. So now let us quickly write this down. So yes, the maxillary sinus is the largest, and it is also known as antrum of Highmore. Also known as antrum of Highmore. At birth, is it present? Yes or no? Yes, it is present at birth. What is the size? It is largest. It is largest with a capacity of around 15 ml. The shape is like a pyramid. Yes, all this now I have told you. So you will be answering this before I write. Yes, the apex is towards the zygomatic bone. Zygomatic bone, and the base is the lateral wall of nose. Is the lateral wall of nose. The roof is floor of orbit. Roof is the floor of orbit. Floor of orbit. And the floor is related to which tooth? Yes, the second premolar and first molar. And first molar. Second premolar and first molar. The drainage is anti-gravity. It is anti-gravity, and it is in which meatus? Middle meatus. Exactly. Can you tell me which area of middle meatus? Yes, that is in the infundibulum. Can you tell me infundibulum is where? Infundibulum. Where is infundibulum? Yes, where is infundibulum? Which area here is infundibulum? Yes, infundibulum is the area in between the uncinate process and the lateral wall. So, in between the uncinate process and the lateral wall, that is the infundibulum, where opens the maxillary sinus ostia directly. We will see the infundibulum when we see the CT. I will show it to you very clearly there. Now, the most common sinusitis in adults is, yes, it is maxillary sinusitis. So, just note it is in adults. Okay, what is in children? I will just tell you in some time. So, this is maxillary sinusitis in adults. So if you have to approach the maxillary sinus, how do you approach? Yes, so we have the middle meatus here, the endoscopic picture of the middle meatus. Yes, this is the middle turbinate. This is the middle turbinate. Middle turbinate. And lateral to that, this area is the middle meatal area. Lateral to that, this is the septum here. So this is the lateral wall. This is the lateral wall. So this is the middle meatal area. What is this that you are seeing? Yes, this is the uncinate process. Let us come a little more closer. So yes, this is the middle turbinate, which we have retracted towards the septum, and we can see the middle meatal area very clearly here. Yes, this is the uncinate process, and this is the bulla ethmoidalis. All this we have already done when we did the lateral wall of nose. Now I want to go into the maxillary sinus to remove the disease from the maxillary sinus. So how am I going to approach the maxillary sinus? How am I going to approach the ostium? Yes, for that, I will have to remove this uncinate process. The moment I remove the uncinate process, in between the uncinate process and the lateral wall, that is the infundibulum, where opens the maxillary sinus ostia. So here, yes, this is of the other side. This is the turbinate here. This is the middle turbinate, and this is the lateral wall. This is the lateral wall. So this is the uncinate process which is being removed, and once I remove it, I will be able to see the maxillary sinus ostia. So this is the middle turbinate here. This is the middle turbinate, this one. The uncinate process was here. It has been removed, and I am directly into the infundibulum. I can approach the maxillary sinus very clearly now. Now when we see on CT, so yes, where are we seeing the maxillary sinus here? Yes, this is the maxillary sinus. Yes, quickly name this. Uncinate bone. And what is this area where the maxillary sinus is opening in between the uncinate bone and the lateral wall? What is that? Yes, that is the infundibulum. And if we remove the uncinate process, uncinectomy, we can directly approach the maxillary sinus. The next sinus to develop after the maxillary sinus is the ethmoid. Yes, the ethmoid sinus develops at outpouchings in the ethmoid bone, and there are multiple air groups of ethmoid sinuses. They are divided into anterior and posterior group, known as anterior ethmoid and posterior ethmoid. The ethmoids which open in the middle meatal area, they are known as anterior ethmoid. The one that open in the superior meatus are known as the posterior ethmoid, because superior meatus is present little posteriorly. So that is what is the posterior ethmoid. Now, yes, the ethmoids are present at birth. They develop after maxillary, but both maxillary and ethmoid are present at birth. But the maximum pneumatized at birth is not maxillary. Maximum pneumatized is ethmoid, making ethmoid sinusitis the most common sinusitis in infants and children. Is that clear? Yes, we will write it. Before that, just see the ethmoid sinus. Where is it placed? Yes, the ethmoid sinus, lateral to the ethmoid sinus is the medial wall of the orbit. What's the clinical significance of that? Yes, the clinical significance is that in which sinusitis will the pain increase with movement of eye? So just by little history, you can exactly pinpoint which sinusitis it is. Yes, in ethmoid sinusitis, because it is separated from the orbit just by thin papery bone. What bone is this? Yes, this is the lamina papyracea. Yes, that is the part of the ethmoid bone. And again, if you have not seen the anatomy of the lateral wall of nose, please see that before. We have done all this very beautifully there. So yes, because it is separated from the orbit by a thin papery bone, lamina papyracea, any ethmoid sinusitis pain will be aggravated by movement of eye. Now the orbit is here. Here we have the ethmoid. We have the frontal, maxillary, and just below that, behind that is the sphenoid sinus. So all these sinuses, if get infected, can lead to orbital complication. Now here I will ask you, which sinusitis leads most commonly to orbital complication? Most commonly, all can lead. Most commonly is, yes, ethmoid. Yes, the most common is ethmoid because it is separated from the orbit by thin papery bone, lamina papyracea. Also, they have a common venous drainage. Yes, so this is a very common question that is asked from you. So now let us quickly write down what we have seen about the ethmoid sinus. So is the ethmoid sinus present at birth? Yes or no? Yes, it is present. Not only it is present, it is maximally pneumatized at birth. So ethmoid is maximally pneumatized at birth. So most common sinusitis in children is ethmoid. The lateral wall is the lamina papyracea, which is the medial wall of orbit. Lamina papyracea, or you can just write it as orbit, the medial wall of orbit. So we have to be very careful while operating on the ethmoid sinuses. Why? Because a little laterally you go, there's a very thin papery bone, you can injure the orbit. So pain of which sinusitis increases with eye movement, increases with eye movement, increases with eye movement. Yes, which sinusitis is that? Again, that is the ethmoid sinusitis. Which sinusitis leads to orbital complications most commonly? Again, that is ethmoid sinusitis. In other words, the same thing can be asked as, which is the most common complication of ethmoid sinusitis? Yes, ethmoid sinuses can very commonly lead to the orbital complications. That is the most common complication of ethmoid sinusitis. Yes, orbital complications. So they are divided into anterior ethmoid and posterior ethmoid. Anterior ethmoid open into middle meatus and posterior ethmoid open in the superior meatus. In the superior meatus. Now just see here, the ethmoids are very, very pneumatized. Yes, we know that the ethmoids are so pneumatized that they are divided into anterior and posterior group. Now, when the pneumatization of the ethmoid sinus is even more extensive, means it goes beyond this limit of the middle meatus and the superior meatus also, then they are named. So for now, let us confine to the anterior ethmoid. Now the anterior ethmoids are supposed to be only limited in the middle meatus, right? But if they are extensively pneumatized, then what can happen? They can be extensively spread everywhere. They can go laterally a lot. Yes, they can also go, they are supposed to be in the middle meatus area. So this area is the middle meatus area. Yes, so they can go anterior to the middle meatus. They can go anterior to the attachment of middle turbinate. So the ones which are going outside, extensively pneumatized, and the important ones, the most important ones are named. So we have mainly 3 named anterior ethmoidal cells. So which are these 3 named anterior ethmoidal cells? The one that is present in the middle meatus. that is the largest anti-8th model cell, that is what is known as bulla ethmoidalis. So the largest is bulla ethmoidalis. In fact, let us make a table like this. Yes, named anti-8th model cell, named anterior ethmoidal cell. Ethmoidal cell, it is the largest, that is the most important for us. This is known as bulla ethmoidalis. Bulla ethmoidalis. The one that is anterior most, even anterior to the middle turbinate, that has been named as agar nasi. Agar nasi. And the one that is gone laterally, that has gone to the floor of orbit. Floor of orbit. That is the infraorbital cell. Infraorbital. This has been named as Haller cell. As Haller cell. Okay, now let us see each of them one by one, because these are the cells that you are asked repeatedly in your exams to identify on CT or on endoscopy. So let us see how they look like. Now, yes, the most prominent anti-8th model cell is, we know it is bulla ethmoidalis. Where here is the bulla ethmoidalis? Now, I am going to quickly mark some structures and you are going to tell me what they are. Yes, tell me this one. This is what? Yes, very good. Inferior turbinate. This is maxillary sinus. This is, yes, the middle turbinate. This is, yes, uncinate process. And what is this one? 5. What is this 5? Yes, 5 is the most prominent anti-8th model cell, and that is bulla ethmoidalis. This is present in the middle meatus. And what is the area in between the uncinate process and the bulla? Do you know what is this area known as? Yes, we have already done that. This area is a opening in between. It is a semilunar opening in between the uncinate and the bulla, and that is what is known as a hiatus, a semilunar opening, hiatus semilunaris. Okay, so what we are seeing here is the largest anti-8th model cell, and that is bulla ethmoidalis. How does this bulla ethmoidalis appear on endoscopy? Again, we have seen that already, but that is just a revision, quick revision. So here, this is the middle turbinate that we have retracted towards the septum. What we are seeing is the middle meatal area here. Yes, name this. What is this uncinate process? What is this here? This is the bulla ethmoidalis. So if this is marked on endoscopy, will you be able to identify? Yes, if this area is marked, this area in between the bulla and the uncinate process, what is that area? Hiatus semilunaris. Yes, hiatus semilunaris leads into the infundibulum. Now let us see what is the other named anti-8th model cell. One we have seen, that is the most prominent, that is bulla. Now just see the other anti-8th model cell. Now normally the anti-8th model, can you see here? This is the lamina papyracea. This is the medial wall of the orbit, or this is the division between the ethmoid, anterior ethmoid and the orbit, the lamina papyracea. Yes. So all the anti-8th model cells are supposed to be present on the lamina papyracea here. Is that clear? Can you see here the bulla? All they are just limited. They are supposed to be here. None of them are supposed to be normally present in the floor of orbit. All of them are supposed to be on the medial wall of the orbit. Is that very clear? They are supposed to be on the medial wall of orbit. But if they go and they are so pneumatized that now they are present even in the inferior wall of orbit, then this is the arrow that is marked here, the star that I am making here. This is what is known as the infraorbital, also known as Haller cell. So now just answer these questions. Haller cell is present in the floor of orbit, true or false? True. Haller cell is infraorbital anterior ethmoidal cell, true or false? True. Haller cell is a named anterior ethmoidal cell. Yes or no? Yes. Haller cell is present in the roof of maxillary sinus. Yes or no? What? Yes. Once when there was a question, instead of given floor of orbit, what was given was in the roof of maxillary sinus. Will that be true? Yes. The floor of orbit is the same as the roof of maxillary sinus. Yes. So it is present either in the floor of orbit, you can say, floor of orbit, or it is in the roof of maxillary sinus. Roof of maxillary sinus. And what is the significance of this Haller cell? What will be the significance? Yes, just notice here, if there is air cell which is going to the inferior wall of the orbit also, which means roof of the maxillary sinus also, can you see it has narrowed the drainage of the maxillary sinus so much? This area has got narrowed so much because superiorly is occupied by the Haller cells. Yes, so this can become a cause of obstruction of the drainage of maxillary sinus. This can become a cause of recurrent maxillary sinusitis. So the significance is that it can lead to recurrent maxillary sinusitis. Also, if there are infraorbital cells present and we are not aware of it. So what can happen is while we are operating in them, there are chances of injury to the orbit because we are not expecting any air cells there. We are not careful that we might injure the orbit. So yes, the second significance is there are chances of injury to the orbit. Now, the third anti-ethmoidal cell is, what is that? Yes, that is the anteriormost anti-ethmoidal cell. So, what is anteriormost? Yes, normally, this here is the middle turbinate and lateral to that is the middle meatus. So, the anterior ethmoids are supposed to be localized in the middle meatal area, in this area, right? Now, if they are extensively pneumatized, then they can extend more anteriorly, anterior to the anterior attachment of middle turbinate also. And that is what is known as agar nasi. So, anteriormost anti-ethmoidal cell is what is known as agar nasi. And what will be the significance of agar nasi? So, just note here, we have the frontal sinus here. This is the frontal sinus. Now, the frontal sinus, where does it drain? Does it drain in the middle meatus? Yes, it drains in the middle meatus. How? Through a duct. What is that known as? Frontonasal duct or frontal recess. So, this comes down here like this and opens in the middle meatus, right? So, this here is the frontonasal duct or the frontal recess. Now, suppose if there is a large air cell present here. We have the large air cell present here. So, what will happen? It will compress on the drainage of the frontal sinus and that can lead to recurrent frontal sinusitis. And these agar nasi cells are quite frequently present. So, this large agar nasi cell pressing on the frontal recess is a very common cause of recurrent frontal sinusitis. Now, let us quickly see how these agar nasi cells appear on CT. So, yes, what you are seeing here is a sagittal cut of the nose and paranasal sinuses. And yes, can you identify this sinus for me? Yes, this is the frontal sinus. This is the frontal sinus. This is the middle turbinate attachment that we are seeing here. Yes, and we can see that this air cell, this big air cell, can you see here? Yes, that is anterior to the attachment of the middle turbinate, anteriormost attachment of middle turbinate. That is the anteriormost anterior ethmoidal cell, and that is what is known as, this is what is known as the agar nasi. Yes, now let us see a coronal cut section. So here, the one that is marked with the arrow, yellow arrow, this is the agar nasi. How do you know that this is agar nasi and not bulla ethmoidalis? Yes, the agar nasi is the anteriormost anti-ethmoidal cell that will be present in the cut section, the coronal cut section where we are seeing the frontal sinus, and in the anteriormost cut section, in the quite anterior cut sections. Yes, just note that the maxillary sinus is quite behind, right? So, when we are taking anterior cuts, the maxillary sinus will appear very small. Just see here. Can you see how small the maxillary sinuses are appearing, or maybe they're just appearing? It will appear just like that. Whereas otherwise, just see when we say posterior cuts, how big the maxillary sinuses are appearing. But when we take anterior cuts, the maxillary sinus will appear very small. So just by seeing the maxillary sinus, we know it is a very, very anterior cut, and the middle turbinate has not yet, we are not able, here is the inferior turbinate. The middle turbinate we are not even seeing here. So this is anterior to the anterior attachment of middle turbinate, and this is the agar nasi. Now, how much I am showing you on the CT scan endoscopy is sufficient for your exam. Just in case if you feel that you want to see the exact cut sections of the paranasal sinuses on CT more beautifully and more elaborately, you can find it on my YouTube channel in the name of Manisha ENT. But how much I am showing it to you now and how much I am telling you now, with that much you should be able to identify, and that much is sufficient for you. So yes, we can see here the endoscopy of the middle meatal area, can you here spot where you will find the agar nasi? Yes. So where is the anterior attachment of middle turbinate here? So this is the middle turbinate. This is the anterior attachment of middle turbinate. So this here will be the agar nasi cell. Is that clear? So if this endoscopic picture is given and this area is marked, we know this is the area of agar nasi. It is absolutely clear. Is that absolutely clear? Okay. So now what we saw is that how many named anti-eighth model cells we have? Quickly tell me. Yes, named. 3 named. Which is the most prominent? Most prominent. Yes, bulla ethmodalis. Where is that present? In the meatus itself. That is the one that we see very, very commonly. Yes, bulla ethmodalis. Okay, what is the anterior most anti-eighth model cell? Because of extensive pneumatization, anterior most, what is that? Yes, that is agar nasi. That is anterior most. Okay, and which is the one that goes in the floor of the orbit or infraorbital? Yes, that is the Haller cell. Presence of which cell can lead to recurrent frontal sinusitis? Agar nasi, recurrent maxillary sinusitis. Haller cell, which is present at birth, maxillary or ethmoid? Both. Which is maximally pneumatized? Ethmoid. Most common sinusitis in adults? Maxillary. In children? In children is ethmoid. Yes, in children most common is ethmoid. Which sinusitis pain increases with movement of eye? Ethmoid sinusitis. Orbital complications occur most commonly following which sinusitis? Ethmoid sinusitis. Very good. Now coming to the posterior ethmoids, where do the posterior ethmoids open? Yes, the posterior ethmoids open in which meatus? Yes, they open in the superior meatus. So this is the area of the superior meatus. So the posterior ethmoids open in this area, the superior meatus. Superior meatus. Yes. Now just see here. See this area. Can you make out that the superior turbinate ends here? Which means that the superior meatus will also end here. Which means that the posterior ethmoids are supposed to be localized to this area. Yes or no? Yes. Now like anterior ethmoids which can be extensively pneumatized, can go anterior to middle turbinate, they can go laterally to the floor of orbit. Similarly, the posterior ethmoids also can be very extensively pneumatized. And when they are extensively pneumatized, where can they go? Just see here. What lies posteriorly is the sphenoid sinus. So they can go around the sphenoid sinus and then they come in contact with very important structures. What are these important structures? These important structures are actually normally related to sphenoid sinus. So let us first see what these structures are. So here we have the skull. This is the body of sphenoid, right? The body of sphenoid, inside the body of sphenoid is present the sphenoid air sinuses. And what is present over the body of sphenoid? Above it, yes, that area is what is known as sella turcica. What is present in the sella turcica? Yes, it is the seat for pituitary, right? This much we know. Now here the pituitary has been removed and what you are seeing is the sella turcica. And below that is the sphenoid sinuses. Yes, so just note here, what opening do we have here? Yes, we have the optic canal here, and what goes out through the optic canal? Yes, the optic nerve. Where's the optic nerve? Yes, so the optic nerve, yes, it passes. It is very closely related to the roof of the sphenoid sinus and it exits through the optic canal. Then after passing very closely in relation to the roof of the sphenoid sinus. Also, what do we have laterally here? Laterally, what do we have here? Can you tell me? What do we have here? Yes, do we have the cavernous sinuses here? Yes, we have the cavernous sinuses here. And what is the important vessel that passes through the cavernous sinus? Very good, internal carotid. Have we read about internal carotid in the year also? Yes, we saw that the internal carotid enters the petrous bone through the carotid canal and then it comes out at the roof of the foramen lacerum and then it goes anteriorly. And when it goes anteriorly, it passes through the cavernous sinus. It passes through the cavernous sinus, which means, can I say that the internal carotid is very closely related to the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus? Yes, exactly. So now when the posterior ethmoids, which are supposed to end before the sphenoid sinus, just see here, the posterior ethmoids are supposed to end before the sphenoid sinus. Here, they are supposed to end before the sphenoid sinus. Now, when they have extended around the sphenoid sinus, now these structures, the internal carotid as well as the optic nerve come in very close relation to these cells, and these have been named as these air cells, which go and they lie in relation to the sphenoid sinus because of the extensive pneumatization of the posterior ethmoid, are known as Onodi cell. Onodi cell. Now, let me try to make you understand the Onodi cell by a simple three-dimensional idea. So here, this is suppose the lateral wall of the nose. Okay, so this is the lateral wall of my left nostril. Okay, now here we have the turbinates. Yes, so suppose this here is the superiormost turbinate, and this space that you are seeing in between the turbinate and the lateral wall, this what you are seeing is the superior meatal area. In the superior meatus, we are supposed to have the air cells which are known as the posterior ethmoidal air cells, right? Now, where is the sphenoid sinus? Where is the sphenoid sinus? This is a lateral wall. Where is the sphenoid sinus? Yes, we have the two lateral wall here. This one is one, this is the other. Where the sphenoid sinus? It opens in the center, right? So yes, this here is the sphenoid sinuses. Yes, we have the two openings of the two sphenoid sinuses. We have two of them. Yes, they are paired. So these are two openings of the two sphenoid sinuses. It is present in the center like this, right? So now what I am doing is I am removing this lateral wall. So I have removed the lateral wall and I have left the superior turbinate here. Okay, and this area that you are seeing, this is the superior meatal area in which we have the posterior ethmoidal air cells. So this air that you are seeing inside, just suppose it that these are the air cells, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are multiple of them, the posterior ethmoidal air cells. Now all of them end before the sphenoid sinus. Yes, they end before the sphenoid sinus. That is what I showed you on the lateral wall. The superior meatus ends before the sphenoid sinus. Yes, so we are not supposed to have any posterior ethmoidal cells around the sphenoid sinus. So when we are operating on the posterior ethmoidal cells, we know that yes, they will just finish before the sphenoid sinus. So we are safe. We do not have to worry about internal carotid. We do not have to worry about the optic nerve. We have the optic nerve going from here. We have the internal carotid going lateral to the sphenoid sinus. We don't have to worry about all these things because the posterior ethmoids will finish before the sphenoid sinus. We have to worry about these structures, the optic nerve and the internal carotid, when we are operating on the sphenoid sinus. Yes, when we are operating inside the sphenoid sinus, we are careful when we go superiorly not to injure optic nerve. When we go laterally, not to injure the internal carotid, and they are not very commonly injured also. Why? Because the bones, the walls of the sphenoid bone are very hard bony, very hard bony. Now, suppose that this posterior ethmoidal cells in a patient are extensively pneumatized. So now what has happened is, now just see, can you see that the posterior ethmoids which were ending here earlier, now they are extending up till the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus. They have gone lateral to the lateral wall of sphenoid sinus. They have gone superior also. Here also they have occupied all this space. Yes. So now these important structures, the optic nerve, they will be now, instead of in relation to the sphenoid sinus, they will be in relation to the Onodi cell, the posterior ethmoidal cell. Now this internal carotid which is supposed to be in lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus, now because in between the lateral wall and the internal carotid, now we have this air cell, this one. Yes, we have this air cell. This is the Onodi cell. Yes, so now the internal carotid is in close relation to the Onodi cell, and the walls of these air cells of the ethmoid, they are very, very friable. They are like eggshell, even more friable than that, which means now when I am operating on the ethmoids and I am not knowing that this patient has a Onodi cell. So through the posterior ethmoids, I have removed the disease. I'm going on opening all the air cells, and it is not difficult to open the air cells. You just have to put the forceps and the air cells, open the forceps and the air cells will be opened. So now you are going on opening, removing the disease from it, removing the disease. You're not aware and you have reached up till the Onodi cell, right? You have reached up till the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus and you're not aware that this patient has a Onodi cell. Now you will think, okay, here also there might be some disease in some air cell. You will go laterally. You will go superiorly. And now if you go laterally, what will you injure? Internal carotid. If you go superiorly, what will you injure? Optic nerve. And if you injure the internal carotid, patient, you will lose on table. Yes, if you injure the optic nerve, post-surgery patient will have blindness. Can you imagine how catastrophic that will be? Yes, so I hope you've understood what exactly Onodi cell means. It is just extensive pneumatization of the posterior ethmoids. So yes, because of these pictures being two-dimensional, you do not usually have a very clear idea. That is why I just tried to show you like that. I hope it is clear now. So because you just rectify, okay, Onodi cell, Onodi cell, Onodi cell. It is in relation to, immediately you will tell, it is in relation to optic nerve, it is in relation to internal carotid. And now the question that is asked is, what is the most dreaded complication of FES? And the answer there is injury to internal carotid. And then you think, how can this be the answer? Injury to internal carotid. Where is the internal carotid in relation to the nose? We have the internal carotid going here. It is going through the petrous bone, and then it is intracranially. Where is it in relation to the nose? So now can you make out where it is in relation to the nose? Lateral wall of sphenoid sinus, yes. And also if Onodi is present, then it is in lateral wall of the Onodi cell. Is that very clear now? So now when we see the CT scan, maybe now you will understand it. Yes, again there is a sagittal cut. Can you see here? I will just label it for you. This is the frontal sinus. Yes, this is the frontal sinus. And here we will have the anterior ethmoids. We will have the posterior ethmoid here, and this is the sphenoid sinus. The sphenoid sinus, how can we notice this is sphenoid sinus? Yes, we have the pituitary here. We have the sella turcica here, the pituitary fossa. And can you make out that the posterior ethmoid is going like this here? This is the posterior ethmoid. It is supposed to end before the sphenoid sinus, but it is going over the sphenoid sinus also. And how will this appear on a coronal cut section? Yes, just see here. Yes, this is the sphenoid sinus. These are the two sphenoid sinus. How do we know that this is the sphenoid sinus and this is not the sphenoid sinus? How do we know this is not? Yes, in between the two sphenoid sinuses, we always have a vertical septum. So this vertical septum will divide the two sinuses. So this is one of them, this is the other of them. And this which we are seeing, which is separated from the sphenoid sinus by a horizontal septa. Horizontal septa. Yes, this is what is the Onodi cell. This is the Onodi cell. Onodi cell. Is that very clear? So what you have to do to identify a Onodi cell, just see a horizontal septa between the sphenoid sinus. Inside the sphenoid sinus, if you're seeing it, yes, the horizontal septa, that will be the one that separates the sphenoid sinus from the Onodi cell. So now, normally, can you identify this structure? This one here on both the sides? Yes, this is the optic nerve. Now here laterally here, this area is the area of the internal carotid. Okay, so this is normal. This side is normal. We can see that these structures are in relation to the sphenoid sinus. Now see on the other side where we have the Onodi cell present. Now we can see that both the optic nerve, as well as here we have the internal carotid artery, both of them are now in relation to the Onodi cell. Is that very, very clear now? Will you ever forget it? Okay, very good. No, never forget it. Okay. So yes, posterior ethmoids open in which meatus? Posterior ethmoids open in the superior meatus. The superior meatus is posterior most. So that is superior meatus. Named posterior ethmoidal cell is Onodi cell. It is a part of which sinus? It is a part of posterior ethmoids. It's a part of posterior ethmoids, but the question changes now. It is in relation to which sinus? Can you make out? These are two different. It is a part of which sinus, and second, it is in relation to which sinus. So if you are in too much of a hurry to answer the question, what happens is you just mistake one for the other. And then the answer is wrong, whereas these are such a simple questions. Yes, and very, very frequently asked. So it is a part of posterior ethmoids, but it is in relation to sphenoid sinus. That is why this is also known as sphenoethmoidal air cell. It is also known as Onodi cell is also known as sphenoethmoidal air cell. And it is in relation to which important structures? Yes, it is in relation to the optic nerve and the internal carotid artery. And when we do FES and I ask you what is the most dreaded complication of FES, I will see whether you are answering or not. Yes, internal carotid. So now it is very clear for you. Where is the internal carotid? How is it related to Onodi cell? How is it related to sphenoid sinus? So yes, we know now what the ethmoids are, what the maxillary is. Yes, both of them, be it anterior ethmoid or posterior ethmoid, both of them are present at birth. Yes, so posterior ethmoid is also present at birth. What do you think about the sphenoid sinus? What do you think about the sphenoid sinus? Is it present or absent at birth? Sphenoid sinus is also present at birth. The sphenoid sinus is present in millimeters at birth. It is not clinically significant, but if it is asked present or not present, then yes, it is present at birth. And where does the sphenoid sinus open? So we have the sphenoid sinus here. Where is it opening? Yes, does it open in the superior meatus? No, it opens in an area above the superior meatus. And that is the area which is a recess in between the sphenoid and the ethmoid. So it is known as sphenoethmoidal recess. And the sphenoid sinus, what do you think? Will it get infected very commonly? Where is it present? It is present in the midline, in the roof of the nose. That is not affected by most of the conditions of the nose. So that is the least common sinusitis. Least common sinusitis. And if at all there is sinusitis of sphenoid sinus, where exactly will be the pain to help you know that yes, this can be sphenoid sinusitis? Which sinusitis pain increases with movement of eye? Movement of eye? Yes, the ethmoid sinusitis. Yes, which sinusitis pain will be referred to occiput or the vertex? Yes, that will be sphenoid sinusitis. So now let us quickly write this down. So yes, at birth, is it present? Yes, it is present at birth. Yes, location is, it is present in the body of sphenoid. Body of sphenoid bone. Or sphenoid bone. Yes, it opens in the sphenoethmoidal recess. Headache of sphenoid sinusitis is referred to the occiput. Yes, you have to tell all this before I tell you occiput or the vertex. Least common sinusitis. Quickly tell me, what is the least common sinusitis? Yes, least common sinusitis is sphenoid sinusitis. It is in relation to laterally what? Sphenoid sinus is in relation to laterally. You will have to tell me. Yes, internal carotid artery. Superiorly. Yes, superiorly to the optic nerve. And also superiorly to something else. What is that? Yes, to the pituitary fossa. It is also related to the pituitary. Pituitary. That is the sella turcica. So since it is related to the pituitary, this pituitary can be approached through the sphenoid sinus. So the pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus is very, very important, because to remove the benign tumors of the pituitary, to go for a hypophysectomy. Do you know how we approach the pituitary usually? Yes, through the nose. It is transnasal hypophysectomy. So for hypophysectomy, you don't have to go for intracranial surgery. You can do it endoscopically through the nose. That will be such a minimal approach. Yes, but for that, we have to know whether the sphenoid sinus is well pneumatized or not. If it is well pneumatized, just see like here. Here we have the pituitary fossa. We have the sella turcica, pituitary fossa. Below this, here we have all bones. So to approach through the bone to the pituitary will be not very easy. Whereas in this one, just see here, we have the sphenoid sinus, which is so well pneumatized. So we can very easily through the sphenoid sinus reach the pituitary. So that is why we have to know how well the sphenoid sinus is pneumatized before we think of approaching the pituitary. Also, we have to know the sphenoid sinus is very well pneumatized or not, because if it is very well pneumatized, as in this case here, we can see that in between the sphenoid sinus and the brain and the cranium, yes, and the brain, there is so little space. So if you're not careful, you can directly enter the cranium. Is that clear? So we have to know what the pneumatization pattern of the sphenoid sinus are. So according to the pneumatization pattern, the sphenoid sinus pneumatization is divided into three types. This is what is known as the concha. Concha means what? Bowl. Yes, concha in the nose is turbinate. Concha in the ear is this bowl of the ear. So what is concha? Conchal pneumatization is that the sphenoid is present like a small bowl here. Small bowel, like a small bowl. Yes, that is conchal. The second is where the sphenoid sinus pneumatization ends before the sella turcica. Just before the sella turcica is starting, till there it ends. This is what is known as the precellar. Precellar. Before the sella turcica. And the third is the extensively pneumatized. This is what is known as cellar. All below the pituitary, all below the sella turcica, it is pneumatized. We have the sphenoid sinus. This is known as cellar, or it is known as post-cellar. And this is the most common variety of pneumatization that we find. So now let us see how on CT they appear when we get the CT scan done to evaluate the sphenoid sinus pneumatization. Yes, can you identify this? What is this one? This is which variety? Yes, this is the conchal. Which one is this? This is precellar, and this one is cellar. Can you note here? When it is extensively pneumatized, in between the posterior wall of the sphenoid and the brain, there is just this wall. So if you are expecting that, okay, in between the brain and the posterior wall, there will be a lot of bone and you are just forcefully going, then you will enter the brain. So that makes this area very significant. So do you know everything about the sphenoid sinus? Yes, it is in which bone? Yes, it is in the body of the sphenoid bone. Laterally we have internal carotid. Superiorly we have optic nerve. Yes, how many paired sinuses do we have? How many paired sphenoid sinus do we have? Yes, 2 paired. So we have all the paranasal sinuses, all of them are paired. What is the lining of the sphenoid sinus? Lining epithelium of the sphenoid sinus? Ciliated columnar pseudostratified, same as the nose. Of the maxillary, same. Of ethmoid, same. Of frontal, same. Everything is the same. What is the most common pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus? Yes, that is post-cellar, or you can call it as the cellar. Is it present at birth? Yes or no? Yes, it is present. Is maxillary present at birth? Present. Ethmoid present at birth? Present. Sphenoid present at birth? Present. So not present at birth is frontal, or is that also present? Frontal is not present at birth. In fact, frontal is the last in everything. It is not present at birth, which means it is the last to start development. It is the last to complete development. It is the last to be viewed on X-ray. So it is the last in everything. So there are some books that might mention it differently. What I am referring to is to tell you is the latest edition of Scott Brown. So it is clearly mentioned last to develop, last to start development, last to complete development, as well as last to be seen on X-ray is the frontal sinus. Yes, we will write it down. Before that, let us quickly see some more points about the frontal sinus. So which is, do you think, the anteriormost sinus? Frontal, that was easy. Which is the superiormost? Superiormost is frontal or sphenoid? Frontal or sphenoid? The base of skull, just see here, base of skull is not straight. It goes slanting down like this. Yes, so where is the sphenoid? Sphenoid is here. Where is the frontal? Frontal is here. So yes, it is also the superiormost. It is the anteriormost. It is the superiormost. Where does it open? Yes, it opens through a recess into the middle meatus, frontonasal duct or frontal recess. Yes, it opens in the middle meatus. What's the least common sinusitis? Is it frontal or is it sphenoid? Okay, you're thinking I already told you that. But, okay, maybe I want to change the answer. Is it frontal or is it sphenoid? So, are you in a fix now? Frontal or sphenoid? It is the sphenoid. Least common is the sphenoid. Why not frontal? It opens in which meatus? Middle meatus. Along with maxillary and ethmoid. Most common sinusitis is maxillary followed by ethmoid. In children, most common is ethmoid. They have a common drainage area. The maxillary, the frontal and the ethmoid, they have an anterior ethmoid. All of them have a common drainage area. Maxillary and ethmoid infection is so common. So if they have a common drainage area, will it not infect the frontal also? Yes, whereas the sphenoid opens in the midline, not affected by most of the condition of the nose. It is opening in the roof of the nose somewhere. Yes, so the least common is the sphenoid. The least common is not frontal. And which sinus has a drainage which is helped by gravity? First tell me which is not helped by gravity, which is hampered by gravity. Yes, maxillary sinus. We saw that it was draining. It has an anti-gravity drainage. Which is helped by gravity? Yes, the frontal sinus. So what? It is held by gravity. So that is responsible for the type of headache that is present in frontal sinusitis. When there is edema of the frontonasal duct or the frontal recess. So what happens is, now when the patient lies down at night, all the secretions collect in the frontal sinus. When he gets up in the morning, when he wakes up in the morning upright, so now with gravity, slowly the secretions start draining because it is held by gravity. So slowly it will drain, and by evening the headache will be gone. What is this type of headache known as? This is early morning headache or office headache. Yes, or this is also known as periodic headache. Why periodic? It is there in the morning, by evening it is gone. Yes, so let us quickly write all these things here. Is it present at birth? No, it is absent at birth. Last to completely develop is frontal. Last to be seen on X-ray is again frontal at around 6 to 8 years, which means that if you are thinking of frontal sinusitis in a child, frontal sinus is usually not developed, and for that you get an X-ray done. Will you see the frontal sinuses? No, so don't be surprised that, oh, this child, the frontal sinus is atrophic, it is absent. It will not be seen in an X-ray before 6 to 8 years of age. Yes, it drains in the middle meatus through frontal recess. Through frontal recess. And what is the headache known as? Headache is known as office headache. Office headache, or it is known as early morning headache. Early morning headache, or it is known as periodic headache. Periodic headache. So now quickly keep your pens down. Yes, okay. So now quickly tell me, which is the earliest sinus to develop? Maxillary, most pneumatized at birth. Ethmoid, not present at birth. Sphenoid or frontal? Frontal. Last to completely develop is again frontal. Which extraction of which tooth can lead to oroantral fistula? Second premolar and first molar. The pain of which sinusitis increases with movement of eye? Movement of eye? Ethmoid sinusitis is maximum in the morning. Frontal sinusitis. Office headache is seen in frontal sinusitis. Which sinusitis headache is referred to the occiput? Sphenoid sinusitis. What is the Onodi cell in relation to? Onodi cell is in relation to which paranasal sinus? First you tell me. Sphenoid sinus. It is a part of which sinus? Or posterior ethmoid. It is in relation to sphenoid sinus, in relation to which important structures can be injured? Yes. Optic nerve and internal carotid. These two structures are normally in relation to which paranasal sinus? Sphenoid sinus. Sphenoid sinus. Which is the anterior-most anti-ethmoidal cell? Agarnase. Infraorbital anti-ethmoidal cell? Haller cell. Onodi cell is anterior or posterior ethmoidal cell? It is posterior ethmoidal cell. Which is the last paranasal sinus to develop? Last is frontal. Not present at birth is frontal. Most common sinusitis is in adults, maxillary. In children, ethmoid. Least common sinusitis is sphenoid. So that is what we needed to know in the anatomy and the clinical significance of the anatomy of the sinuses. So now whenever there is an infection of the nose, can it very easily go into the sinuses? Yes, it can. So can it lead to sinusitis? Yes. So that is why sinusitis is nowadays known as rhinosinusitis, because it follows rhinitis. So now can you tell me what is the most common cause of sinusitis? Same as rhinitis. So the most common cause of rhinitis is what? Yes, viral. Viral rhinitis is what? Common cold. So most common cause of sinusitis will also be viral. So most common cause will be viral. And if it is bacterial, then the most common organism causing acute sinusitis is Streptococcus pneumoniae. That is pneumococcus. Streptococcus pneumoniae. That is pneumococcus. And the same infection can go through the eustachian tube into the middle ear, leading to some condition of the middle ear. Which middle ear infection? Acute otitis media. So most common organism causing acute otitis media is also pneumococcus. Yes, so just remember, most common organism causing sinusitis, acute otitis media, all that is Streptococcus pneumoniae or pneumococcus. So what will be the complaint that a patient of sinusitis will come with? Whenever there is sinusitis, when do you suspect that this patient has sinusitis? What will be the complaint? Yes, patient will have nasal obstruction. Yes, the presentation will be patient will have nasal obstruction. You must have developed sinusitis sometimes, no? So you know what the symptoms are. Nasal obstruction, patient will have nasal discharge, patient will have facial pain. Facial pain. Yes, because of edema inside the nose. The sense of smell goes down. Hyposmia. Hyposmia. So, what is the features of maxillary sinusitis? Same. Presentation of ethmoid? Same. Of sphenoid? Same. Of frontal? Same. Means all the sinusitis will present same with nasal obstruction, nasal discharge, with hyposmia, with facial pain. Then how can we differentiate which sinusitis it is? Can history help us to differentiate which sinusitis it is? Yes or no? Which sinus pain increases with movement of eye? Ethmoid. Which sinus pain is referred to the occiput? Sphenoid. Which sinus pain is early in the morning? Yes, office headache, early morning headache. Frontal. Yes. So all these points in the history can help us find out which sinusitis it is. So whenever a patient has come to you with a complaint that the patient has all these symptoms, so we know that these symptoms, nasal obstruction, discharge, pain, and hyposmia, all these we know is features of sinusitis. So how will you go about this? And this is, whether it is asked in your exam or not, each one of you should know this. Why? Because sinusitis is something that you will have so commonly. Sinusitis is something that your families, your friends, somebody will ask you what to do. So you have to know what to do, right? The moment you enter the first year, you are doctor and everybody will start asking you what to do, what not to do. But anyway, yes, this is also important for your exams also. So yes, what will we do now? What will we do now? Yes, so now the symptoms are suggestive of sinusitis. We want to confirm. How will we confirm? Yes, that we will do by anti-rhinoscopy. So now on anti-rhinoscopy, what you will see is, yes, you will see mucopollulant discharge in the middle meatus. You will see called congested nasal mucosa. Congested mucosa. You will see mucopollulant discharge in the middle meatus. So then you will confirm that this is sinusitis. Now the problem arises is that whether it is viral or whether it is bacterial. Because that will be important to give the management to the patient. If it is viral, you will just give symptomatic management. Whereas if it is bacterial, you will have to start antibiotic. Antibiotic you will start against which organism? That you know you are ready with the antibiotic, Streptococcus pneumoniae. Yes, against Streptococcus pneumoniae. But whether to give antibiotic or not, that is what is important. Yes. So how will you differentiate whether it is bacterial or it is viral? I have already told you earlier also that viral features are always generalized. Viral will not be localized to one area. Is that very clear? That is generally it goes for viral. Viral features are usually general malaise, general weakness, prostration. Patient will have a lot of headache and patient will have sneezing, and all those features are suggestive of viral. What are the features that are suggestive of bacterial? Bacterial is localized. Okay, so just remember what features will tell you that it is bacterial. If it is first, there is discolored discharge. If it is mucopurulent discharge, okay, so you can just ask what is the color of discharge. It is just watery, that is viral. If it is mucopurulent, discolored, that is mucopurulent, then it is suggestive of bacterial. Okay, and also the discharge is unilateral, means it is localized to one area. Second, if there is pain, very severe pain, yes, you touch here, patient will tell, all this is hurting, it's very painful, and this pain is usually it is localized, it is unilateral. All these are suggestive of bacterial pathology. 3, if the fever is very high fever, and 4 is double sickening. What's the meaning of double sickening? Double sickening means initially the patient was not very symptomatic, he was not very troubled for 3 or 4 days, and after 3 or 4 days suddenly he started having very severe symptoms. So initially he was having some symptoms which went down and then suddenly it increased. So it indicates that there is bacterial superinfection. That is what is known as double sickening. So all these are the features of bacterial. So accordingly, you will manage the patient. If it is viral, just symptomatic. If it is bacterial, you know antibiotics against which organism you have to give. Yes, you have to give antibiotics against Streptococcus pneumoniae. So management will be, if bacterial, you will go for antibiotics. You will go for decongestants. Decongestants, never for more than 7 days. Now you have given antibiotics to the patient and the patient tells you that, see doctor, I'm not getting relieved. Yes, the symptoms of the patient, no matter how much antibiotic you have given, everything you have given, and the patient is not getting benefit at all. Yes, and you have been giving medical management to the patient. So if the sinusitis prolongs to more than 12 weeks, then that is what we call as chronic sinusitis. Yes, then if it is for more than 12 weeks, then we call it as chronic sinusitis. If it has persisted for more than 12 weeks, sinusitis. If it is less than 12 weeks, then we call it as 12 weeks is 3 months. Yes, we know that mostly for all chronic, we call it less than 3 months is acute, more than 3 months is chronic. So less than 12 weeks is acute sinusitis. So then you exactly want to know what is the problem that the patient is not benefiting. Yes, then you can go for endoscopy. Now, if in acute sinusitis also, if you want to you're not able to see the mucopus, or you want to see exactly why, if you have given antibiotic for 5 days and the patient has not benefited, there also you can go for endoscopic examination of the nose. But in chronic sinusitis, it becomes more important that you examine the nostril, why the patient is not benefiting. Is the patient having some concabulosa? Yes. So next, what you go for is endoscopy of the nose. And the definitive diagnosis of sinusitis can be made by endoscopy. Yes, definitive diagnosis of acute sinusitis can be made, acute sinusitis, or of chronic sinusitis also it can be made by endoscopy, by nasal endoscopy. Nasal endoscopy, and nasal endoscopy is done under local anesthesia or general anesthesia. Yes, it is a OPD procedure. You just put anesthetic packs into the nostril, and the endoscopes that we use is a rigid endoscope. Usually it can be done with flexible also, and again we have done all this very beautifully in the anatomy of the lateral wall of the nose. So yes, we go for nasal endoscopy, and what you will see on endoscopy is the mucopus, the mucopillant discharge in the middle meatus. Now you want to confirm what exactly is the cause, which all areas are involved, which all sinuses are involved. Is there a Haller cell in this patient? Is there a Onodi cell? Is the patient having what abnormality which has led to this sinusitis? Which all sinuses are involved? For that, we will not be able to see that on endoscopy. Yes, so for definitive diagnosis, we can say that yes, we have done an endoscopy and we have seen pus there. But the best for confirming the diagnosis will not be endoscopy. The first will be endoscopy, but the best will be a CT scan. Yes, so the best for chronic sinusitis is a CT, NC-CT. And chronic is what? When the duration is more than 12 weeks. So what are you seeing on the CT? You can see the osteometal complex block. Can you see here the osteometal complex block? Yes, we can see that the maxillary sinus is, we can see the air fluid level here. We can see mucosal thickening here. Yes, so what we can see is that, yes, which sinuses are involved, where all we have to operate, how much we have to limit, what are the anatomical abnormalities or additional abnormal extensive pneumatized air cells that are present, which are not normally present. So as we are seeing here that it is only the maxillary sinus involved. So only the maxillary sinus is involved. Ethmoids are clear. Then we can just limit our surgery to only the maxillary sinus. We need not go and open all the ethmoid air cells. We need not approach the frontal sinuses. So any patient of chronic sinusitis, now you have diagnosed that this is a patient of chronic sinusitis more than 12 weeks. You have now by CT come to know what all is the area that is involved. How will you manage this? We know acute sinusitis just by anterior rhinoscopy also you can diagnose, and you have to give management depending upon it is viral or it is bacterial. Now in chronic sinusitis, what will be your management? Will you go for medical management? Yes or no? Yes, the first management is always medical. Always remember, chronic sinusitis, the management is first always medical. First is always medical. First management is medical. Medical management, you will give antibiotics. Antibiotics against which organism? So what is the bacteriology of chronic sinusitis? Yes, it is a mixed. So chronic sinusitis is caused by mixed organisms. It is mixed. Mixed means what? Mixed aerobic and anaerobic. Mixed aerobic and anaerobic, and in aerobic the most common here is staph. Yes. So the first management will be medical management. In the medical management, you give the patient antibiotics, you give the patient decongestants. And yes, if it is just minimal infection that you're seeing, you can also give to reduce the edema of that area, and you can give steroids also, intranasal steroids, and then give antibiotic also together with that, so that maybe the edema will resolve and the infection will resolve by medical management itself. So then you also need to give nasal steroid sprays. Yes. And if the patient does not benefit, yes, if no benefit, then you have to go for opening up the osteometal complex area. Then you need to open this. You will have to open this area so that now the ventilation and drainage of the sinuses will occur. And what is that surgery? Yes, that is by FESS. What is FESS? Yes, FESS is functional. What is the full form of FESS? It is functional endoscopic sinus surgery. Yes, why is it known as functional? Because it restores the function of the sinus. What is the function of the sinus? Yes, it restores the function. What is the function? Function of ventilation and drainage. So it is known as functional. And here we remove everything unhealthy. Whatever is healthy, we preserve. Yes. Endoscopic, because it is done with the help of endoscope. We are operating on the sinuses, so it is known as sinus. FESS, or functional endoscopic sinus surgery. So now you have, here is a patient who came to you with these complaints. You diagnosed that yes, this is a patient of sinusitis. You gave the medicine, patient was not responding. You did endoscopy, you did a CT scan. This patient was not responding for more than 3 months. You gave the medical management, completed for 1 month, and the patient is not benefiting. Yes. So now you are ready for, all set for FESS. Yes. So now when you are all set for FESS, are you just able to imagine which area you are going to operate? This is the area, such a crucial area. What do you have laterally? Orbit. What do you have superiorly? Cribriform plate. We have the brain. What do we have posteriorly? Again, we have the sphenoid sinus. Above that is pituitary. And the sphenoid sinus wall can be very thin. The lateral to the sphenoid sinuses can be ONOD cell if you are operating on the ethmoid. Yes, the ethmoids also can be infraorbital. So now, and the cribriform plate can be very, very low lying. So we have to be very, very sure about what we are going to find, because this is a patient of sinusitis. You will not find a very good normal anatomy. You are going to find disease. You are going to find pus. You are going to find polypoidal mucosa. Yes, so you are going to find abnormal findings there, and the anatomy of this patient has to be very, very clear, because you will not be able to visualize the anatomy very carefully when all that area is diseased where you are operating. So which means that it is mandatory that before you go for a functional endoscopic sinus surgery, to get some investigation done. What is that investigation? Yes, that is a CT scan. You have to get an NCCT done before you go for FESS. Yes, and what are the structures that you will visualize on the CT scan? How do you remember that? Yes, to take a close call before FESS, you get a CT scan done. And what do you have to visualize? Close. What is close? C is the cribriform plate. The cribriform plate. Yes, what in the cribriform plate you have to see? Yes, we know that the cribriform plate can be either just the olfactory fossa can be only this much, that is around 1 to 3 millimeters. It can be deeper down, that is 4 to 7 millimeters. And it can be further very deep, 8 to 16 millimeters, which means that if it is so low lying in the nose, if you're not aware of it, very easily you can injure the cribriform plate there, leading to CSF rhinorrhea, because you're not aware that that is where you can find the cribriform plate, right? So this is what is the Quiros classification. And this is type 1, this is type 2, and this is type 3. Now what is L? L is Lamina peperacea. Lamina peperacea. Yes, so first thing that you have to visualize is this cribriform plate depth. Yes, second thing you have to see is the Lamina peperacea. Yes, Lamina peperacea, is it dehiscent in this patient? Is it eroded in this patient? So that already there is a dehiscence, it is very thin wall, already it is dehiscent. So then the chance of injuring the orbit will be very high. So you have to visualize the Lamina peperacea. You have to see whether there is any Onodi cell or not. We know what the Onodi cell is, yes, and we have to see the sphenoid sinuses, whether how pneumatized they are. In the sphenoid sinuses, we also have, what do we have laterally? Yes, we have the internal carotid. So PLE, we have the optic nerve. Many a times, the lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus can be dehiscent. So let us see the sphenoid sinus. Yes, this here is the sphenoid sinus. We can make out this here is the sphenoid sinus. Do we have the Onodi cell here? Onodi cell, if it is present, it will be present separated from the sphenoid sinus by a horizontal septa. Now here it is not present. So anyway, that is not what we have to worry about. But still, is there something to worry about? Is there something that we want to visualize? Yes, we want to see what is this area? This is the area of the internal carotid. Yes, this is the area of the optic nerve. So we want to see whether this lateral wall of the sphenoid sinus is dehiscent or not. It can be dehiscent, and sometimes when it is dehiscent, we can also see the pulsation of the internal carotid through that. Yes, so if you're not careful and you are thinking that okay, it will be okay, then you can injure the carotid. You can cause a carotid blowout. The patient will die on table. Yes, so these are very, very important things which you want to see before you are going for FES. Yes, and what is E? E is the ethmoidal artery. Ethmoidal artery. What is the ethmoidal artery? Yes, the ethmoidal artery is a branch of the ophthalmic. Ophthalmic is in the eye, yes. So the ophthalmic gives the anterior ethmoidal and it gives the posterior ethmoidal in the eye. So here we have the ophthalmic. Yes, it enters, if I ask you, it enters the eye through supraorbital fissure or optic canal. Yes, through the optic canal, and when in the eye, it gives two branches to the nose, the posterior ethmoidal and the anterior ethmoidal. They enter through the same name canal into the nose. Now once they are in the nose, now what happens? Yes, just see here. This, can you see this? Can you see some notch here? Notch here? Yes, what is this notch? This is while the anterior ethmoidal artery from the orbit is entering into the nose. Is that clear? So here, now it enters into the nose. When it enters into the nose, it passes through like this, through the roof of the nose to come to the septum, to come to supply the septum. So it passes through the ethmoid cells. Can you notice here that when it is passing through the nose, it is actually passing through the ethmoidal cells. These are the anterior ethmoidal cells. All these cells are the anterior ethmoidal cells. So it is passing through the ethmoidal air cells, anterior ethmoidal cells, to go to the roof and then to come to the septum to supply it. Which means that if this anterior ethmoidal cells are diseased, yes, and you exactly do not know from which area this is going. So now what will happen is you can injure this. You can injure the anterior ethmoidal artery. Yes, so you have to see this projection, and this projection was given in your exam last year on the CT and was asked, what is this projection of? Yes, so this is the bulge, this is the projection that is produced by the anterior ethmoidal artery. And yes, we will do this in great detail when we do epistaxis, where we'll do the anatomy of the arterial supply also. So anterior ethmoidal artery, and this projection is what is known as anterior ethmoidal notch. Anterior ethmoidal notch, also known as nipple sign on the CT, nipple sign. This is known as the nipple sign on CT. Yes, so if it gets injured, what will happen? Yes, it is coming from the eye into the nose. It has got injured, so it will retract back into the eye. And if it retracts back into the eye, that can be an emergency. Why? Because this will lead to orbital hematoma. Can you say it can lead to orbital hematoma? Why is that an emergency? Yes, that is an emergency because all around the walls of the orbit are quite hard. They are bony. Yes, so if there is hematoma, blood collecting in the orbit, there is no space to expand. It will ultimately press on the optic nerve and that can lead to blindness. So then this has to be immediately taken care of. Immediately it has to be drained. Yes, so that is why we have to be very careful about each and everything while operating. Before we are operating, we have to be very sure that in this patient, this is where I'm going to find this. This is how his cribriform plate will be. This is how his lamina pepracia will be. This is when I'm going through the posterior ethmoid. I will find the Onodi cell. Yes, so I have to be careful in this patient. So all this you have to be very clear in your mind before you take up the patient for surgery. So now you have got this CT scan done. You are very clear with everything of this patient inside the nose, the anatomy of the nose, anatomy of the sinuses, and now you're all set for FES. Yes, so now what will be the first step for FES? What will be the first step? Yes, the first step for FES is to remove the uncinate process. So this is the first step for FES. First step is uncinectomy. Uncinectomy. First step for infundibulotomy. Uncinectomy, what are you doing? You are opening up the infundibulum. So first step for FES, so first step of infundibulotomy is what? It is uncinectomy. Uncinate is a part of which bone? Do you remember? Ethmoid bone. Okay, that was just, I wanted to check whether you remember or not. So once we have removed the uncinate process, we are directly into the infundibulum. We have now removed the disease from the maxillary sinus. We have widened the maxillary sinus ostia. Now we can go into the ethmoid. We can go into the frontal depending upon what was seen on CT, what all is involved. So now let us quickly see a video of how FES is done. So let us quickly see FES being done in a patient of chronic maxillary sinusitis. So this is the left nostril in which we are operating. So here that is the lateral wall and that there is the septum. We can see a DNS and yes, just see that. Yes, the middle turbinate is what we are seeing there. And the suction you can see is in the middle meatal area, which is sucking out the pus, the discolored mucopus from the middle meatus. So yes, this is a patient of chronic maxillary sinusitis, not benefited by the maximum medical management. And yes, we can see the bulla there. The probe was on the bulla. And that is the uncinate process into the infundibulum through the hiatus semilunaris. The probe has gone. And this uncinate process, when we remove, we will be directly into the infundibulum where we have the opening of the maxillary sinus. So we will widen the maxillary sinus ostia to restore the function of the maxillary sinus ostia, the ventilation and drainage. So yes, we are using backbiting forceps here to do an uncinectomy. Yes, what is the first step for FES? Yes, that is uncinectomy. Very safely we can do uncinectomy with the help of the backbiting forceps. We can see uncinate process is being removed in chunks and yes, more mucopus is being suctioned out through the maxillary sinus ostia. And we are going to widen the maxillary sinus ostia once it comes into view. So yes, we can see the maxillary sinus ostia is open now. We can see it through the infundibulum. The infundibulum has got opened. And this maxillary sinus ostia will be widened. And what instrument we are seeing here is a microdebrider. It is like a shaver. It has a very sharp blade which rotates at a very high speed and that removes the mucosa. And yes, we can see that the maxillary sinus ostia is quite wide now. It will be able to drain as well as ventilate the maxillary sinus very beautifully. So whatever was the obstruction has been now taken care of and we can have a view into the maxillary sinus through the angled endoscopes. And yes, we are having a view. We can see the granulations, the granulation tissue in the maxillary sinus ostia. Can you see the red things? So these are the granulations that we are seeing inside the maxillary sinus. Can you see it different from the normal mucosa? The normal mucosa which is appearing white. And this is a slight reddish appearance, a yellowish reddish appearance of the granulation tissues. So now once the maxillary sinus ostia is open and once antibiotic is given, this is going to resolve. Now can you make out what has happened? Yes, a FES was done for this patient. What has happened now? Yes, synechia has formed. Synechia. Why sinus? We know that this is a very narrow area already, and when you are operating for FES, you are doing it definitely when there is an osteometal complex block, when there is lots of infection here. So whenever you do FES, when you operate in this narrow area, there are high chances that you will, because of removing the disease, there are chances that you have created raw areas on both the lateral wall also and on the middle turbinate area also. So after FES, when they come close together again, because it is a narrow area, they are supposed to be close to each other. So now what will happen is synechiae will form. So it is mandatory that after you do FES, you put a pack here. You put a pack here, and this pack that is impregnated with a drug which is used to reduce synechiae, and that is again a question of your exam, that is mitomycin C. Mitomycin C. So what can be the complications of FES? Yes, what can be the complication? The complication is the same that we read about, the structures that you have to be careful about. If you're not careful, you will end up injuring them. So close. Yes, that is also the complication. Let us see. The most common complication but is hemorrhage, like any other surgery. Yes, C. Now you will tell me. Yes, you will tell me. C. Injury to. Yes, cribriform plate. Very good. L. Injury to lamina papyracea. O. Onodi cell. So injury to optic nerve. Injury to internal carotid artery. Again, sphenoid sinus. Chance of injury to same. E. Injury to ethmoidal artery. Yes, if you injure, what will happen? Orbital hematoma. And again, it has been asked in reverse order that orbital hematoma following FES. You have done a FES. Following that, what has resulted is orbital hematoma. This has occurred because of injury to ethmoidal artery. And out of these, tell me which is the most dreaded? Most dreaded is yes, of course, injury to internal carotid artery. That is the most dreaded. So we know where the internal carotid artery is, right? Very good. Now, whenever we operate on the sinuses to remove disease from it, be it the sinusitis, be it polyps that are rising from the sinuses that we are removing, whenever we are operating with endoscope into the sinuses, that is what is called FES. Yes. But many times we are operating through endoscope inside the nose. That is, we are operating on the septum to repair the septum, septoplasty. We are operating on the turbinates for turbinate reduction. We are operating for corneal atresia. We are operating for ligating the sphenopalatine artery in epistaxis. All that is done through endoscope inside the nose, but we are not operating on the sinuses. So that is not called FES. Yes, FES is operating on the sinus, functional endoscopic sinus surgery. When we are operating with the help of endoscope inside the nose but not on sinuses, that is known as endoscopic surgery of the nose. So what are the conditions where endoscopic surgery inside the nose can be done when you're not operating on the sinuses? Yes, it can be used for septoplasty. It can be used for turbinate reduction, inferior turbinate hypertrophy, turbinate reduction. It can be used for ligating the sphenopalatine artery, sphenopalatine foramen. Do you remember where it is? Yes, 1 centimeter behind the middle turbinate. And again, in the arterial supply of the nose, we will do that very clearly, very beautifully. So yes, for ligating the sphenopalatine artery, for corneal atresia. Yes, again for corneal atresia. So in all these nasal conditions, we are operating on the nose but not on the sinuses. Now we can also operate through the nose endoscopically when we have to operate outside the nose. Not inside the nose, outside the nose. That also we can approach endoscopically through the nose. What all things can we approach? Think and tell me. Through the nose, if we are approaching, what all can we approach? Yes, we can approach lacrimal sac. Did we do that? That nowadays when we have to open the lacrimal sac, when the nasolacrimal duct is blocked, we open it endoscopically through the nostril inside. Yes, that is dacrocystorhinostomy. So we can approach lacrimal sac. That is endoscopic DCR. Through the nose. Earlier, before the advent of endoscope, it was done by an external incision. Now it is done endoscopically through the nose. We can approach the orbit. Can we approach the orbit through the nose inside? Usually that's a complication, no? When you're operating on the ethmoid sinuses, you can injure the orbit. But when will you like to approach the orbit? Through the nose inside. Yes, whenever there is orbital hematoma, there is orbital abscess, and we know it is an emergency and we have to drain it immediately. So we know all the walls are hard bony except for the lamina papyracea, that is a thin papery bone. So if you want to approach the orbit through the lamina papyracea, from where will you approach? Obviously through the nose. So we can approach the orbit. Yes, if there is a CSF leak, following any fracture or trauma, again if you have to repair the CSF leak, will you like to go intracranially? No, we will like to go through the nose inside. This is the most common site of leak, cribriform plate fracture. So we can approach the cribriform plate. Cribriform plate. Can you approach the sphenoid sinus? Yes, we can approach the sphenoid sinus. We can approach the sphenoid sinus also. Transnasal hypophysectomy we can do. Cerebellum. Cerebellum. Can you approach through the nose? In your wildest dreams? Sadly not. You can approach only the anterior cranial fossa and up till the middle cranial fossa, the pituitary fossa. Through the nose, you cannot approach the cerebellum. Yes? Yes, so all these are the things that you can do through the nose endoscopically. In fact, nowadays, a very important thing, tumors. The tumors of the nose, which were initially approached by external incision, most of them can be removed endoscopically. Angiofibroma, the tumors of the nose, the carcinomas, inverted papillomas. Yes, if they are too extensive, where you cannot go endoscopically, like extending very laterally on the roof of the orbit or intracranially a lot, all that you cannot approach endoscopically. But yes, if the expertise of the surgeon is there, then most of the tumors also of the nose you can approach endoscopically. So now do you know what the indications of FES are? Yes, FES is sinus surgery. Yes, for chronic sinusitis, you go for FES. What's the first management for chronic sinusitis? Is it medical or surgical? Yes, it is medical. You give medical management for at least 1 month, not benefited, then you go for FES. What FES? What is FES? Yes, FES is functional endoscopic sinus surgery. Why do we call it functional? Functional. You restore ventilation and drainage of the sinus. You restore the function of the sinus. So it is known as functional. What are the structures that you need to visualize or you can injure following FES? Yes, what is that? Close call. You remember what is close? Yes. Injury to which artery can lead to orbital hematoma, most commonly following FES? Yes, anterior ethmoidal artery. Which type of olfactory fossa, according to Quiroz, is most likely to get injured? Quiroz type 1, 2 or 3? Yes, type 3. That is the lowermost. Yes, so type 3 is around 8 to 16 millimeters deep. The fossa depth is quite a lot. What is the first step for FES? Uncinectomy. Following FES, the nasal pack has to be impregnated with which drug to reduce synechia formation? Mitomycin C. So now we are clear with what we are doing in FES, what can be the complications, what all we have to be careful about while doing a FES. Now just visualize this picture, see this picture and tell me what is being done here. Just take a guess. Yes, a sublabial incision has been given. We can make out that a sublabial incision below the lips has been given. The skin flap has been raised. And one opening I can see here, this opening. Let us take a closer view at this opening. Yes, just see here. Opening has been made here. Why do you think? Yes, to approach the maxillary sinus. Yes, before the advent of endoscopes, now maxillary sinus, if we have to approach, we approach through the middle meatus through endoscope. Before the advent of endoscope, this was the approach that used to be done for treating chronic maxillary sinusitis, and this approach was what was known as, in fact, it is known as Cadwell-Luck. Cadwell-Luck surgery. So Cadwell-Luck is an approach to which paranasal sinus? So it is an approach to maxillary sinus. Now, after the advent of endoscope, do we do it? We do not do it for chronic maxillary sinusitis, but we do it for some other things. For which other things can we do it? Yes, now what do we want to approach through the maxillary sinus? So now if we are doing the Cadwell-Luck, what are we doing it for? Yes, we are approaching the maxillary sinus by making an opening here. This we can do to reduce maxillary fractures. Yes, if there is a floor of orbit fracture, then we can do it. We can reduce it very easily through the maxillary sinus. So to reduce floor of orbit fractures, Floor of orbit fractures. Also, what lies behind the posterior wall of the maxillary sinus? Yes, what do we have behind the posterior wall of maxillary sinus? Yes, we have some fossa. Yes, to approach the sphenopalatine fossa. Approach the sphenopalatine fossa. And what do we have in the sphenopalatine fossa? Do we have the maxillary artery, maxillary nerve, sphenopalatine ganglion? Yes, so the maxillary artery ligation, if we have to do, how do we do? Yes, through the sphenopalatine fossa, through the maxillary antrum, and through the Cadwell-Luck approach. Is that clear? So we make an opening there, anterior wall, and after we have done this Cadwell-Luck, what is done is we have done, just see here, so much of extensively raising of skin flap has been done. So definitely we are expecting that there will be some collection in the maxillary sinus following surgery. So what is done following Cadwell-Luck is this sinus cavity is packed. Yes, even if we are doing for reduction of the orbital flow fractures, we want to support it by a pack in the maxillary sinus. So we've put a pack there. Now when we have to remove that pack, will we again operate like this? No. So when we have put a pack inside, what we do is we make an opening. Where do we make an opening? We make an opening in the inferior meatus, so that the pack can be removed from here, and following removal of pack also, if there is little bleeding or little drainage, it can come out through here and does not get collected in the middle meatus. So this is one question that is asked, that following Cadwell-Luck, the nasoantral window, nasoantral in between the nose and the antrum, the window that is made, it is made in which meatus? Yes, that is made in the inferior meatus. In the inferior meatus. So Cadwell-Luck was an approach to which sinusitis? To maxillary sinusitis. What's the most common complication of Cadwell-Luck? You are raising so much of skin here, you are working so much here. So most common complication is extensive facial swelling. Facial swelling. Followed by, next most common is you are operating in this area. Which nerves come here? Yes, the branches of the inferior orbital nerve. So inferior orbital nerve injury. Inferior orbital nerve injury. And we saw it is, we are giving a sublabial incision. Yes, so there can be injury to tooth. There can be injury to tooth. There can be oroantral fistula. Oroantral fistula. So now there is one surgery which we never do nowadays. It used to be done earlier for chronic sinusitis. A very barbarous procedure that was known as antral puncture or proof puncture. Why antral puncture? Because you are puncturing the maxillary antrum. So this used to be done for chronic maxillary sinusitis. So what was done was sharp cannula. Sharp, can you see how sharp it is? And how big it is and how wide it is. Can you notice? This was passed into the maxillary sinus through the inferior meatus by just giving some local anesthetic in the inferior meatus. Yes, and the fluid was passed through the cannula. So whatever discharge was there in the maxillary sinus, it used to be flushed out through this opening, either the natural opening or it used to come out from this opening also later, and this could be collected for diagnosis purposes, for sending for culture. So this served both the purpose for treating the chronic maxillary sinusitis as well as for confirming the diagnosis that what bacteria it is. Accordingly, you can give the antibiotic. So this was for diagnosis plus treatment. Diagnosis is to collect the discharge. And yes, this is one procedure that I had seen when I was in third year. That is the last time I think I saw that. And that also I had seen because the HOD of the ENT department was very fond of this procedure. Otherwise, endoscopes had come at that time and endoscopic surgeries had started already. And believe me, when I saw this being done, I was so scared. Patient was made to sit and they were in the OPD, the patient was made to sit in front of you. And just a simple nasal pack, a cotton soaked with anesthetic was placed in the inferior meatus for maybe 1 minute. And after that, this big cannula, I was wondering what they're going to do with this. Yes. And they just poked it inside the nose of the patient, and that was not under any general anesthesia. Patient was sitting in front of you in the OPD, on the OPD chair, and immediately the patient was given that bowel, and the fluid was flushed, and all the fluid was coming out, and one of the patient I saw fainted there also. Yes, it is no more done now. In fact, it has been removed from all the books. Some books still have it, and some questions from somewhere people still ask you, maybe of that generation, but it is no more done, and I am sure no more questions will be asked from this topic. But anyway, it is good to know what was the history, what used to be done, and now we are so advanced now. Yes, and this used to lead to death also. Why? Because if you are just poking that inside and it has entered into it has opened some blood vessel, so there can be air embolism and the patient can die also. So the fatal complication is air embolism. Thankfully, with the advent of endoscopes, we are not doing all these things anymore. So that is what you needed to know in the anatomy of the paranasal sinuses, the clinical significance of the anatomy, and rhinosinusitis along with VES.